The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished floors where William and Catherine had walked together for over a decade. The silence between them had grown heavier in recent weeks, filled with unspoken words and careful politeness that once would have been warm laughter and easy conversation. Catherine sat at her dressing table, brushing her hair with the same silver brush that had been a wedding gift from the Queen. Her reflection looked back at her with tired eyes that had seen too much, endured too much, and finally understood too much. The woman in the mirror was no longer the bright-eyed girl who had captured a prince's heart at university. She had become someone harder, wiser, and infinitely more alone despite being surrounded by millions who adored her. William stood at the window of his study 3 rooms away, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the gardeners tend to the roses that Catherine had planted in their 2nd year of marriage. Those roses had bloomed brilliantly every summer since, but somehow this year they seemed different. Even they seemed to sense that change was coming to the palace walls that had sheltered their love story for so long. The morning routine continued as it had for years. Catherine would take breakfast with the children, helping George with his mathematics and listening to Charlotte practice her French. Louis would chatter endlessly about his drawings, showing his mother every crayon mark as if it were a masterpiece. William would join them when his schedule allowed, but more often lately, he would send his apologies through a staff member and take his coffee in the study while reviewing his daily briefings. Neither of them could pinpoint exactly when the distance had begun. Perhaps it was during the difficult period when the press had been particularly harsh about Catherine's family background. Or maybe it started during William's intense focus on his environmental causes, when he spent months traveling and working late into every night. It could have been the weight of royal expectations that slowly pressed down on their marriage like a heavy blanket, making it harder to breathe freely together. Catherine remembered the last time they had laughed together. Really laughed. It was 6 months ago during Louis's birthday party, when their youngest son had insisted on wearing his Superman costume to cut the cake. William had played along, pretending to be in distress so Louis could save him from the birthday candles. They had caught each other's eyes across the room and shared a moment of pure joy, but even that memory felt distant now, like looking at someone else's photograph. The palace staff had begun to notice the changes too, though they were far too professional to comment openly. The way William and Catherine moved through their shared spaces like polite strangers, always courteous but never touching. How they scheduled their public appearances to minimize the time spent alone together in cars between events. The careful way they spoke about each other in interviews, full of respect and admiration, but lacking the warmth that had once made the world fall in love with their story. Their marriage had become a beautiful performance, and both of them were exhausted from acting. They attended charity galas arm in arm, smiled for photographers, and gave speeches about causes close to their hearts. But in the quiet moments between public duties, the silence stretched between them like an ocean. Neither knew how to cross anymore. The children, bless their innocence, remained unaware of the growing distance between their parents. George, now old enough to understand some adult conversations, had occasionally asked why Mama and Papa didn't watch movies together on Sunday evenings anymore. Catherine had explained that grown-ups sometimes needed different kinds of rest, and William had nodded in agreement, neither of them meeting the other's eyes during the explanation. Catherine had begun taking longer walks through Hyde Park, sometimes with her security detail trailing discreetly behind, sometimes finding moments of solitude to think. She would sit on the same bench where William had proposed years ago, remembering how certain they had both been that their love could weather any storm. They had been so young then, so confident that being together was all that mattered. William, meanwhile, had thrown himself deeper into his work, accepting more engagements and spending additional hours in meetings about his various patronages. His staff noticed that he stayed later in the office and seemed reluctant to return home for dinner. When asked about his increased schedule, he would simply say that there was important work to be done and that the people deserved his full attention. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Catherine had been in the garden with the children, teaching them about different types of flowers when she noticed William watching from the terrace. For a moment their eyes met, and she saw something she had never seen before in his gaze. It wasn't anger or resentment, but something far sadder. It was acceptance. The acceptance that what they had built together was beautiful, but no longer sustainable. That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat together in the drawing room for the first time in weeks. Neither of them spoke immediately. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked steadily, marking time that felt both endless and precious. Finally, Catherine broke the silence with words that surprised them both with their gentleness. She spoke about love and duty, about the difference between the two, and about how sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to step back. William listened without interrupting, his hands folded in his lap, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. When she finished speaking, he was quiet for a long time before responding with equal gentleness about respect and honor, and the courage it takes to choose a different path than the one everyone expects. They talked through the night, not as husband and wife trying to save their marriage, but as two people who had shared something beautiful and were now facing the reality that beautiful things sometimes need to change to remain beautiful. By dawn, they had reached an understanding that would have seemed impossible just hours before. The decision to tell the children came first, before the palace staff, before the queen, before the world that had watched their fairy tale unfold. William and Catherine agreed that George, Charlotte, and Louis deserved to hear the news from their parents in their own home, surrounded by love and reassurance. They chose a Saturday morning when there were no official duties scheduled. Catherine made pancakes, William's specialty orange juice, and they gathered around the kitchen table that had been the heart of their family life. The children chattered happily about their plans for the day, unaware that their world was about to shift in ways they couldn't yet understand. William cleared his throat gently, and Catherine reached for his hand across the table. The simple gesture surprised them both with its naturalness. In this moment of truth, the careful distance they had maintained seemed less important than presenting a united front for their children. George, being the eldest, sensed the serious tone first. His chatter quieted, and Charlotte followed suit, though Louis continued arranging his pancake pieces into what he declared was a castle. William began by telling them how much both parents loved them, how that love would never change, no matter what else might change in their lives. Catherine explained that sometimes grown-ups who care very much about each other make difficult decisions together. She used simple words about how Mama and Papa would always be a family, but they might live in different places and have different daily routines. Charlotte asked immediately if this meant they were getting divorced, a word she had learned from a classmate whose parents had separated. The honesty of children cut through all pretense. William confirmed that yes, they would be getting divorced, but he emphasized that divorce between parents doesn't mean the love for children changes at all. He explained that they would still have family dinners, still go on holidays together, still celebrate birthdays and Christmas as they always had. Louis, finally understanding that something important was happening, asked if he could still show his drawings to both Mama and Papa. Catherine's eyes filled with tears as she assured him that absolutely nothing would stop her from admiring every single one of his artworks. George wanted to know if he would still live at Kensington Palace, and William explained that the children would continue living there. With both parents visiting and staying regularly, the questions came in a flood then, practical and emotional mixed together. Would they still have movie nights? Yes, just maybe not every Sunday. Could friends still come for sleepovers? Of course. Would Granny still visit for tea? Absolutely. Would photographers follow them around even more now? William and Catherine exchanged a look. That question had no easy answer. After the initial conversation, they spent the entire day together as a family, playing board games and walking through the palace gardens. The children seemed to process the news the way children do, with remarkable adaptability mixed with occasional bursts of concern or sadness. By evening, Louis had forgotten entirely and was asking about plans for next weekend as if nothing had changed. The next step was informing the Queen. William requested a private audience with his grandmother, something that happened regularly enough not to raise suspicions among the palace staff. He drove alone to Windsor Castle on a crisp Monday morning, his hands steady on the steering wheel despite the enormousness of what he was about to share. The Queen received him in her private sitting room, the same room where she had counseled him about marriage before his wedding, where she had offered guidance during difficult periods of his royal duties, where she had shared wisdom accumulated over decades of service and personal challenges. William had prepared a formal speech, but when he sat across from his grandmother, The prepared words seemed inadequate. Instead, he spoke from his heart about love and duty, about the difference between public service and private happiness, about the courage it takes to make a decision that disappoints people who care about you. The Queen listened without interruption, her expression thoughtful but not surprised. When William finished speaking, she was quiet for several minutes. Finally, she spoke about her own marriage, about the challenges of balancing personal desires with public duty, about the evolution of the monarchy through changing times. Her response surprised William with its understanding. She spoke about marriage as a living thing that requires constant tending, and sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, circumstances change in ways that require difficult decisions. She expressed concern for the children, satisfaction with how William and Catherine had prioritized their well-being, and practical questions about how the separation would be handled publicly. The Queen also shared something William had never heard before. She spoke about moments in her own marriage when she and Prince Philip had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, times when they had to rediscover why they chose each other. But she acknowledged that every couple's story is different, and that sometimes the most loving thing two people can do is give each other permission to find happiness in new ways. Catherine, meanwhile, was having her own difficult conversation with her parents in Bucklebury. Michael and Carol Middleton had watched their daughter navigate the complexities of royal life with pride and sometimes worry. They had seen how the constant public scrutiny had worn on her, how the formal protocols had gradually replaced some of her natural spontaneity. Carol had sensed the growing distance between Catherine and William during recent family visits. The easy affection that had always characterized their relationship had become more formal, more careful. When Catherine explained their decision, her mother's first response was to ask if Catherine was happy, truly happy, for the first time in months. The conversation with her parents lasted through lunch and well into the afternoon. They discussed practical matters like living arrangements and the children's schedules, but they also talked about deeper things. About identity and fulfillment, about the difference between the person Catherine had been when she married William and the person she had become through years of royal duty. Her father asked direct questions about whether this was truly what both William and Catherine wanted, or if it was something that felt forced by circumstances. Catherine's honest answer was that it felt like both. The circumstances had created pressures that made their marriage unsustainable, but the decision to separate was genuinely mutual and made from a place of caring rather than anger. Both families, in their different ways, offered support while expressing natural concerns about the public scrutiny that would follow. The Middletons worried about Catherine's privacy and the children's well-being. The Queen worried about the impact on the monarchy's reputation and the practical aspects of William's future role as heir to the throne. By the end of these family conversations, both William and Catherine felt the relief that comes from sharing difficult truths with people who love you unconditionally. The hardest conversations were behind them, but the most challenging part lay ahead, telling the world. The palace communications team gathered in the oak-paneled conference room, where history had been shaped by carefully chosen words for decades. The statement announcing William and Catherine's separation would be scrutinized by millions, analyzed by experts, and remembered long after they were gone. Every word needed to balance honesty with dignity, transparency with privacy. Sir Clive Alderton, the King's private secretary, led the discussions with his characteristic precision. He had managed royal communications through various crises and celebrations, but this announcement presented unique challenges. The public had invested emotionally in William and Catherine's love story. Their wedding had been watched by 2 billion people. Their children were beloved by the nation. This wasn't simply a marriage ending. It was the conclusion of a fairy tale that had given hope to millions. William and Catherine sat side by side during these planning sessions, united in their determination to control the narrative rather than let speculation and rumors define their story. They wanted the statement to reflect their genuine respect for each other and their commitment to co-parenting. They insisted that the announcement emphasize their continued dedication to their royal duties and their shared love for their children. The communications team presented several draft versions. The first was formal and brief, following traditional royal protocol. The second was more personal but perhaps too revealing. The third struck a middle ground, acknowledging the human elements of their situation while maintaining the dignity expected of senior royals. Catherine surprised everyone by requesting that she and William write portions of the statement themselves. She wanted their own voices to come through, not just the careful language of palace communications experts. William agreed, and they spent several evenings working together on paragraphs that would explain their decision in their own words. The final statement was a masterpiece of careful communication. It acknowledged that their marriage had run its course while emphasizing their mutual respect and continued friendship. It detailed their commitment to co-parenting and their determination to maintain stability for George, Charlotte, and Louis. It outlined how their royal duties would continue uninterrupted and requested privacy during the transition. Most importantly, it included a personal paragraph that both had written together. They thanked the public for their support over the years and asked for understanding as they navigated this new chapter. They emphasized that their decision was made with love and consideration for everyone affected, especially their children. The timing of the announcement required careful orchestration. It needed to be released when both William and Catherine could be present to answer initial questions, but not during a period that would overshadow other important royal events. They chose a Tuesday morning in late April, when Parliament was in session but not dealing with major legislation, when the international news cycle was relatively calm. The statement was released simultaneously to all major news outlets at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning. Within minutes, it was the leading story on every news website, the breaking news banner on every television channel, the trending topic on every social media platform. The world had been expecting something, given the subtle signs observers had noticed over recent months, but the confirmation still created a sensation. The immediate media response was a mixture of sadness, surprise, and respectful coverage. Most established news organizations led with the couple's request for privacy and their commitment to their children. The statement's dignified tone set the framework for how the story was covered in those crucial first hours. William and Catherine had agreed to make one joint television appearance to address the announcement directly. They sat in the same drawing room where they had reached their initial understanding, speaking to a single camera with no interviewer present. Their 5-minute statement was broadcast that evening on all major networks. They looked calm and united as they spoke directly to the camera. William explained that they had made this decision together after much consideration, and that it was the right choice for their family. Catherine added that they remained committed to their royal duties and to raising their children with the same values they had always shared. The most powerful moment came when Catherine spoke about the support they had received from the public over the years. Her voice caught slightly as she thanked everyone who had celebrated their wedding, who had sent good wishes when their children were born, who had supported their charitable work. She said that support had meant everything to them and would continue to mean everything as they moved forward separately. William concluded by asking for patience and privacy as they worked out the practical aspects of their new arrangement. He assured the public that their commitment to service remained unchanged and that they looked forward to continuing their work on causes they cared deeply about. The broadcast was watched by over 20 million people in the United Kingdom alone, with millions more viewing it online and through international networks. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Social media filled with messages expressing sadness about the end of their marriage but admiration for how they were handling the situation. Public opinion polls conducted in the days following the announcement showed that most people respected their decision and appreciated their mature approach to a difficult situation. The monarchy's approval ratings actually increased slightly, with many people commenting that the royal family's handling of the separation showed they had learned from past difficulties and were more in touch with modern realities. Religious leaders, politicians, and other public figures offered statements supporting William and Catherine's right to make personal decisions while fulfilling their public duties. The Archbishop of Canterbury issued a particularly thoughtful statement about the challenges of maintaining personal relationships under intense public scrutiny and the importance of forgiveness and understanding. International reaction was similarly respectful. Foreign media coverage focused on the couple's dignified approach and the stability they were providing for their children. Several other royal families from European monarchies issued private messages of support, understanding from their own experiences how difficult it is to balance public duty with private happiness. The children's schools were notified before the public announcement, ensuring that George and Charlotte could discuss the situation with counselors if needed. Both schools issued statements supporting the family's privacy and asking other parents to help maintain normal routines for all the children involved. Within a week of the announcement, life began settling into new patterns. The initial media frenzy calmed into more measured coverage. William and Catherine were photographed separately attending their usual engagements, both appearing composed and focused on their work. The public began adjusting to the new reality, understanding that this was not a scandal or a crisis, but simply a life change that many families experience. The months following the announcement became a delicate dance of establishing new routines while maintaining the stability that George, Charlotte, and Louis needed. William moved into a wing of Clarence's house that had been prepared for him, close enough to Kensington Palace that the children could move freely between their parents, but far enough to give both adults the space they needed to rediscover themselves as individuals. The custody arrangement they developed was unlike anything the royal family had dealt with before. Rather than following typical divorce patterns, they created a schedule that prioritized the children's needs and their own royal duties. The children would spend 3 nights a week with Catherine at Kensington Palace, 3 nights with William at Clarence's house, and Sunday nights alternating between parents depending on the week's activities. Catherine found herself experiencing a kind of freedom she hadn't felt since her university days. For the first time in over a decade, she could make decisions about her evenings, her weekends, and her personal interests without considering another adult's schedule or preferences. She began taking art classes on Tuesday evenings, something she had always wanted to do but never had time for during the busy years of marriage and young motherhood. William, meanwhile, discovered that living alone required adjustments he hadn't anticipated. Simple things like deciding what to have for dinner or which program to watch on television felt strange after years of shared decision-making. But he also found unexpected pleasures in the solitude. He could work late on his environmental projects without worrying about missing family dinner. He could read for hours without feeling guilty about not spending time with Catherine. The public gradually adjusted to seeing them at separate events. Catherine attended a charity gala for children's mental health, looking radiant in a blue dress that photographers noted was a departure from her usual safe choices. William spoke at a conservation conference, his passion for environmental causes evident in ways that observers said seemed more natural and less constrained than in recent years. Their first major test came during Charlotte's birthday party. They had agreed to celebrate together as a family, but both felt nervous about how it would work in practice. The day went surprisingly smoothly. They fell into familiar patterns of party preparation, with William handling decorations while Catherine managed the catering. When Charlotte blew out her candles, both parents stood behind her, not touching but clearly united in their love for their daughter. The photographs from that birthday party, taken by the palace photographer for the official birthday portraits, showed a family that looked different but not broken. Charlotte beamed between her parents. George and Louis flanked the group, and while William and Catherine weren't standing as close as they once might have, their smiles were genuine and their focus on their children was complete. Summer holidays required more complex planning. They decided to take the children to Balmoral separately, with Catherine visiting for the first 2 weeks of August, and William taking the second 2 weeks. The Queen, who was spending her usual summer in Scotland, appreciated having extended time with each parent individually, and noticed that both seemed more relaxed than they had been in recent years. Catherine's time at Balmoral was particularly significant. Without William there, she found herself having longer conversations with the Queen than they had shared in years. They talked about everything from the children's education to Catherine's charity work, to the challenges of maintaining personal identity within royal life. The Queen shared stories from her own experience that she had never told Catherine before, including difficult periods in her marriage to Prince Philip that the public had never known about. William's Balmoral visit focused on practical matters related to his future role as heir to the throne. With his father King Charles now in the 2nd year of his reign, William was taking on increasing responsibilities. His time in Scotland included long walks with his father discussing the monarchy's evolution and William's vision for his eventual kingship. These conversations were easier without the complexity of also managing marriage dynamics. The children thrived in the routine that emerged from their parents' separation. George, who had initially worried about logistics like school pickups and homework help, discovered that he now had two homes where he was completely welcomed and supported. Charlotte enjoyed having individual time with each parent, finding that her relationships with both William and Catherine deepened when she didn't have to share their attention with managing their relationship with each other. Louis, being the youngest, adapted most easily to the new arrangement. He accepted that sometimes he slept in his room at Kensington Palace and sometimes in his room at Clarence House, with the same flexibility he brought to all aspects of his young life. His main concern remained ensuring that both parents would attend his school performances and sporting events, which they assured him would never change. The royal staff adapted to supporting two separate households while maintaining coordination for the children's needs. Catherine's team at Kensington Palace handled her individual engagements while staying in communication with William's team at Clarence House about family logistics. The children's nanny, who had been with the family since George was born, split her time between both residences, providing continuity and stability. Seasonal events required careful navigation. The family's Christmas plans became a topic of public speculation, but William and Catherine worked out arrangements privately. They would attend Christmas morning service at Sandringham, together with the children, have lunch with the extended royal family, and then Catherine would take the children to her parents' house for a second Christmas celebration while William remained with his family. Their first wedding anniversary after the separation passed without public comment from either of them, though both privately acknowledged the day with mixed emotions. Catherine spent the evening looking through photo albums from their wedding day, remembering how certain they had been that their love could overcome any obstacle. William marked the day by writing in his journal, something he had started doing as a way of processing the changes in his life. By autumn, the new routine felt natural rather than forced. The children had settled into their dual home lifestyle with remarkable resilience. William and Catherine had each found rhythms that worked for their individual needs, while maintaining their shared commitment to co-parenting. Public interest in their separation had evolved from shock and speculation to acceptance, and even admiration for how maturely they were handling their situation. Their individual charity work began to reflect their separate interests in ways that hadn't been possible when they had to coordinate all their activities. Catherine became more involved in arts education programs, something she had always cared about but hadn't prioritized during the years of shared royal duties. William expanded his environmental work to include more hands-on research projects that required travel and time commitments that would have been difficult to manage. As part of a married couple's shared schedule, the transformation was visible to those who knew them well. Both seemed more energetic and focused than they had been in the final years of their marriage. The careful politeness that had characterized their interactions during that difficult period was replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. They were discovering that they could be better co-parents as friends than they had been as a married couple, trying to save a relationship that had run its natural course. The legal formalities of their divorce proceeded with the same quiet dignity that had characterized their separation. They chose to handle the proceedings through private mediation rather than public court hearings, working with senior family law experts who specialized in high-profile cases requiring absolute discretion. The financial arrangements were straightforward, simplified by the fact that most of their assets belonged to the Crown rather than to them personally. Catherine would continue to receive an allowance for her royal duties and would retain her apartments at Kensington Palace for as long as she remained an active working royal. William's inheritance from his mother and his income from the Duchy of Cornwall would remain his own, but he committed to supporting any expenses related to their children's education and activities. More complex were the questions surrounding Catherine's future royal status. After lengthy discussions with constitutional experts, the palace decided that she would retain her titles and continue her royal duties unless and until she chose to remarry. This decision reflected both the modern reality of divorce and the practical consideration that Catherine had built significant charitable relationships over more than a decade of royal service. Their divorce was finalized on a quiet Thursday morning in November, Exactly 18 months after their initial separation announcement, neither attended the brief administrative proceeding. Instead, they were both fulfilling royal engagements on opposite sides of London. William at a veterans event and Catherine opening a new children's hospital wing. That evening, they met for dinner at a private club in Mayfair, their first meal alone together since the early days of their separation. The purpose was to mark the end of their marriage formally and to discuss their plans moving forward. They toasted with champagne to their friendship, to their children, and to the good years they had shared together. During that dinner, they talked honestly about their relationship in ways they hadn't been able to during the difficult final years of their marriage. Catherine admitted that she had felt lost in the royal role at times, uncertain how to maintain her own identity while supporting William's position. William acknowledged that he had sometimes taken her support for granted and had struggled with balancing his desire to be a good husband with the weight of his future responsibilities, but they also talked about what they had built together. 3 wonderful children who were growing up confident and kind, a model of royal service that connected with modern Britain, charitable work that had made real differences in people's lives, a period of the monarchy that had restored much of the institution's popularity and relevance. Spring brought unexpected developments when both William and Catherine began quietly dating other people. The tabloids, which had maintained respectful distance during the divorce proceedings, began speculating about their romantic lives with renewed energy. Catherine was photographed having lunch with James Morrison, a documentary filmmaker she had met through her arts patronage work. The photographs showed them laughing together at a restaurant near her Kensington Palace home, looking relaxed and comfortable. When asked for comment, Catherine's spokesperson simply said that she was entitled to a private life and hoped the media would respect that privacy. William's new relationship became public when he attended a conservation conference with Dr. Sarah Chen, a marine biologist whose research on ocean plastics aligned with his environmental interests. They had met at a scientific symposium and had been corresponding about collaborative projects for months before their professional relationship developed into something more personal. The public reaction to both relationships was surprisingly positive. Opinion polls showed that most people felt William and Catherine deserved happiness and admired their mature approach to both ending their marriage and beginning new relationships. The fact that neither was rushing into anything serious, and that both were choosing partners who shared their professional interests, seemed to reassure the public that they were making thoughtful choices. The children met both James and Sarah gradually and informally. James joined one of their family art museum visits, where his knowledge of photography techniques fascinated George and Charlotte. Sarah attended one of Lewis's football matches, where her enthusiasm for the game and her genuine interest in hearing about his other activities won him over completely. Both William and Catherine were careful to keep their new relationships separate from their co-parenting responsibilities. Family events remained focused on the children, with new partners attending only when specifically invited by the children themselves. This approach helped maintain the stability that had been their priority throughout the divorce process. The first major test of their new dynamic came during the Platinum Jubilee celebrations for King Charles, marking his 3rd year on the throne. The weekend of events required careful coordination to ensure that William, Catherine, and their new partners could all participate appropriately without creating awkward situations or overshadowing the celebration's focus on the king. The solution they developed became a template for future royal events. William and Catherine appeared together for official family photographs and joint ceremonial duties, presenting a united front as co-parents and senior royals. Their new partners attended separate events where their presence was appropriate, but didn't participate in the formal, royal activities that belonged to the immediate family. The Jubilee weekend was considered a great success, both for celebrating King Charles and for demonstrating how modern royal families could adapt to changing personal circumstances while maintaining their public duties. International media coverage focused on the monarchy's evolution and resilience, rather than on personal drama or conflict. By summer, both relationships had become more serious. James had effectively moved into Catherine's Kensington Palace apartments, though they maintained separate bedrooms out of respect for the children's adjustment process. Sarah had begun accompanying William to some of his environmental engagements, where her scientific expertise added value to his advocacy work. The children continued to thrive in their expanded family structure. They had developed genuine affection for both James and Sarah, appreciating that both adults treated them as individuals rather than as extensions of their famous parents. George particularly enjoyed James's photography lessons, while Charlotte loved Sarah's stories about marine animals. Louis simply accepted both new adults as natural additions to his world. William and Catherine found that their friendship had deepened through watching each other find happiness in new relationships. They could share parenting concerns and achievements without the underlying tension that had characterized their final married years. They consulted each other about major decisions regarding the children and often found themselves aligned in ways that had become difficult when they were trying to save their marriage. Their joint appearance at Charlotte's school sports day that summer captured the essence of what their relationship had become. They sat together cheering for their daughter, with James and Sarah nearby but not intruding on the family moment. When Charlotte won her race, both parents jumped up to celebrate, and the photograph of that moment showed two people who had successfully transformed a ended marriage into a successful co-parenting partnership. The autumn brought another milestone when Catherine accepted James's proposal during a weekend in the Scottish Highlands. The engagement was announced through the same careful process that had managed all their major life changes, with a statement emphasizing that the wedding would be a private ceremony focused on celebrating their love and building their future together. William's response to the engagement announcement surprised many with its warmth and genuine happiness for his former wife. His statement congratulated both Catherine and James and expressed his pleasure that his children would have such a positive role model in their stepfather. The graciousness of his response set the tone for public reaction, which was overwhelmingly supportive and celebratory. 3 years after their separation announcement, William and Catherine had created something unprecedented in recent royal history. A divorced couple who had successfully maintained their friendship, their co-parenting relationship, and their individual royal duties while building new personal lives that brought them genuine happiness. Catherine's second wedding to James Morrison took place on a brilliant Saturday morning in June at a small Norman church near her parents' home in Bucklebury. Unlike her first wedding's global spectacle, this ceremony was intimate with only 50 guests including close family and friends. George, Charlotte, and Louis participated in the ceremony, with George serving as ring bearer and the two girls as junior bridesmaids. William attended the wedding with Sarah, sitting with his children and genuinely smiling as he watched Catherine pledge her life to someone who clearly adored her. In his speech at the reception, he spoke about the journey that had brought them all to this moment, about the courage it takes to choose happiness over expectation, and about his gratitude that his children would grow up seeing love in many different forms. The photographs from Catherine's second wedding showed a woman who looked genuinely radiant, not with the careful perfection of royal duty, but with the natural glow of someone who had found her place in the world. James looked equally happy, and the children appeared completely comfortable in their roles in their mother's new beginning. William's own engagement to Sarah came 6 months later, announced during a quiet period in the royal calendar. Their relationship had deepened through shared work on ocean conservation projects, and their engagement reflected their mutual commitment to environmental causes as much as their personal love. The engagement ring was a simple sapphire that had belonged to Diana, chosen by Sarah herself from several pieces William offered from his mother's jewelry collection. Planning William's wedding required more complex considerations than Catherine's had. As second in line to the throne, his wedding needed to balance personal desires with constitutional requirements. After extensive discussions with the palace and the government, they decided on a ceremony at St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, smaller than his first wedding but more formal than Catherine's second. The guest list included heads of state and senior royals from around the world, but the ceremony maintained an intimate feeling through personal touches that reflected William and Sarah's shared interests. Instead of traditional wedding flowers, the chapel was decorated with arrangements that highlighted endangered plant species, symbolizing their commitment to conservation work. Catherine attended William's wedding with James and her children, wearing an elegant navy dress that photographed beautifully, but didn't compete with the bride's attention. Her presence at the ceremony sent a powerful message about the possibility of maintaining respectful relationships even after marriage's end. When the cameras caught her applauding during the vows, Her expression showed genuine happiness for William's new beginning. The reception speeches became the subject of much discussion afterward. William thanked Catherine publicly for her grace throughout their divorce and for the wonderful job she continued to do raising their children. Catherine responded with her own toast, speaking about the importance of choosing kindness over bitterness and celebrating the different forms that love can take throughout a lifetime. Sarah's integration into royal life proceeded more smoothly than anyone had anticipated. Her scientific background and genuine passion for environmental issues gave her natural credibility in her new role. Unlike Catherine, who had to learn royal protocol from scratch, Sarah approached her duties with the confidence of someone who was already accomplished in her own field and was simply adding new responsibilities rather than creating an entirely new identity. The children's adjustment to their expanded family continued to impress everyone involved. George, now a teenager, had developed close relationships with both James and Sarah, appreciating that both adults treated him as a young person with his own interests, rather than just as a prince. Charlotte enjoyed having two stepmothers who brought different strengths to her life, with James encouraging her artistic interests and Sarah inspiring her growing fascination with science. Louis, now old enough to understand the family dynamics, took pride in explaining to school friends that his family was different but worked well because everyone genuinely cared about each other. The practical arrangements of their blended family required constant communication, but had settled into workable routines. Major holidays were shared, with Christmas morning at Sandringham including both James and Sarah as natural parts of the extended royal family. Summer holidays were coordinated so the children could spend time with both parents and their new spouses, often including joint activities that brought everyone together. William and Catherine's co-parenting relationship had evolved into something that surprised even them with its effectiveness. They consulted each other about major decisions regarding the children's education, health, and activities, but they also found themselves turning to each other for advice about their new marriages and careers. The foundation of friendship they had built during their separation had grown stronger, rather than weaker, as they each found happiness with new partners. Their individual royal work had flourished in ways that might not have been possible if they had remained married. Catherine's arts patronage had expanded internationally, with James's documentary skills helping to create powerful films about the organizations she supported. William's environmental work had reached new levels of impact, with Sarah's research providing scientific grounding for policy recommendations that were being implemented by governments around the world. The monarchy itself had benefited from their mature approach to personal change. Public approval ratings for the royal family had remained strong throughout their divorce and remarriages, with many people expressing admiration for how they had prioritized their children's welfare and maintained their public duties. International observers noted that the British royal family's handling of personal challenges seemed more modern and relatable than traditional approaches. 5 years after their separation announcement, William and Catherine appeared together at George's graduation from secondary school, both with their new spouses, all 4 adults clearly comfortable in each other's company. The photograph from that day captured something remarkable. 2 couples who had created a genuinely functional blended family, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to the children they all loved. During the graduation ceremony, George gave a speech as head boy that thanked his parents and step-parents for showing him that families can take many different forms and that love multiplies rather than divides when it's handled with wisdom and kindness. His words brought tears to all 4 adults' eyes and served as a testament to the success of the unconventional family structure they had created. Looking back on their journey from fairy tale marriage to graceful separation to successful blended family, both William and Catherine could see how each phase had been necessary for their growth as individuals and as parents. Their first marriage had given them their children and taught them about love's possibilities and limitations. Their separation had required courage, but had allowed them to rediscover themselves as individuals. Their new marriages had brought them different kinds of happiness while maintaining the bonds that truly mattered. The world that had watched their fairy tale wedding and mourned their separation had ultimately witnessed something perhaps more valuable, a demonstration that love can evolve, that families can adapt, and that endings can become beginnings when handled with grace. wisdom, and genuine care for everyone involved. Their story became less about a fairy tale that ended and more about real people who chose kindness over bitterness, growth over stagnation, and love in its many forms over the safety of familiar unhappiness. In the years that followed, both couples continued their royal duties with energy and commitment that seemed renewed by their personal happiness. The children grew into confident young adults who credited their parents' example with teaching them that change doesn't have to mean loss, that families can be created through choice as well as birth, and that the most important thing in any relationship is treating each other with respect and kindness. Their story became a new kind of royal fairy tale, one that acknowledged that sometimes the most loving thing two people can do is give each other permission to find happiness in new ways, while maintaining the bonds that truly matter. It was a farewell that the world remembered not for its sadness, but for its grace, its wisdom, and its ultimate celebration of love in all its forms.